Hi guys, Russell here from homebrewrepublic.co.nz. Welcome to another brew review. Today we're checking out the Mangrove Jack's Lucky Goat Pale Ale. For this brew review, I'm going to follow the new format and I'm going to make two brews today. For the first brew, what I'm going to do is get this brew on in the simplest and easiest way possible. So I'm basically going to take the kit, I'm going to use the factory yeast, I'm going to use dextrose, I'm going to get some water in and let that brew go. For the second brew, what I'm going to do is take a recipe approach. So I'm going to use the base kit, but I'm going to swap out the yeast and use a premium yeast. I'm going to use some dry hops. So I've chosen some dry hops that I think are going to go really well with the kit, and I'll get that into my temperature control fridge. And we'll bring both of those brews back together for the taste test. For those of you who follow the channel, you may remember this was a brew that I did late last year. It's probably about half a dozen videos back. I'll put a link up on the screen for you. When I did it, it was somewhat of a throw together brew. I just sort of grabbed a kit that was handy and a couple of spare ingredients and I got it on. But I was really impressed with the outcome, and ever since then I wanted to come back and have another crack at it and make it again. So a couple of things. What I remember about the brew is that it was characterized by really nice soft fruit undertones. So we're definitely talking about sort of a fruity style beer here. I used the Nelson Sauvin hop, which is a really interesting hop. The reviews online, if you're sort of looking around at that, is that it can be quite a polarizing hop. It's definitely considered a new age flavor profile. The name Nelson Sauvin, I believe, is given to it in part because the flavour is not dissimilar or has a likeable comparison to the flavour profile of a Sauvignon Blanc wine, and I'd certainly agree with that. Don't let that put you off. It's interesting, but it's really good, and the feedback that I got from my friends on that brew was also really good, especially those who like pale ales and like that style of beer, really took to it. Also, anyone who likes fruity flavour profiles, those two preferences will feed well into this brew. The other thing I found interesting is when I decided to do this again, and I had a post up in a couple of forums when I was thinking about what the hop was that I would use this time with that brew. One of the comments that came back in particular was that the person who made this comment said that they believed this was one of Mangrove Jack's best kits, and I would certainly agree with that. I mean, the name by itself, Lucky Goat, is awesome, but I generally agree that it, especially outside of the craft series range, it's one of the better kits that I've had from Mangrove Jack's that's often well received. So, all that said, let's get into this and check out the other ingredients I'm going to use with the recipe. First up, the yeast. So remember, we're doing two brews here. One brew we'll do as simply as possible with the factory yeast. The second brew, as a recipe, I'm going to use a premium yeast, and I've chosen the Safe Ale S33. Couple of reasons I've chosen this. Number one, as the name would suggest, it is well suited to ales or designed to be used with ales. The second reason, and probably the more important in this case, is it's designed to bring out fruity and hoppy expressions. So if you remember, I talked back to the flavour profile being soft fruit undertones. I've chosen a fruity hop, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I feel like this yeast is going to be perfectly paired to it. For our temperature range, this is an ale yeast, so it's going to ferment at slightly warmer temperatures, which is perfect over summer or in those sort of warmer periods. So I'm in autumn now. The recommended temperature range, or the suitable temperature range here, is 12 to 25. What I found over summer is that it was a little bit cooler this year, but I was if I was brewing ambient, I was holding around 24, 26. So for me in summer, that would have been right at the top of that sort of suitable range. Given we've started to cool down for autumn, I would expect if I was using this in ambient that I would be well within that. But the ideal range, so suitable 12 to 25, ideal is 15 to 20. So I'll pick this up again in process, but what I'll be looking to do is probably ferment this through at around about 17 or 18 degrees, nicely in the middle of that. Hops. What I'm going to do for the recipe brew is use the US Amarillo. I've never used this hop individually before, so I'm quite looking forward to it. The US Amarillo, when I looked around online, is regarded as being one of the top 10 most widely used hops. It's fruity but citrusy, and it's regarded as being quite a sweet flavour profile that's closer to oranges than grapefruit. And the other thing I noted about it is it's backed by light floral notes. So I thought that would go really, really well with those soft fruit undertones that we're going to get coming through from the Lucky Goat Pale Ale kit itself. I was a little bit indecisive about what hop I was going to use. So if I was going to go a different way, I mentioned before the Nelson Sauvin. I did that last time, really good outcome. So you could go that way. The other one that I thought about was Cascade, so going down a more sort of citrus profile. I thought that would have gone really well if we've got the soft fruit undertones coming through from the kit. Create a little bit of contrast with a straight sort of citrus profile, Cascade being anchored on grapefruit. If I did that, I probably would have used it more as a finishing hop. The other way that I would have gone, that I thought about, was into the Moteti, which would have given us more of a sort of a tropical finish. So plenty of ways you could go, but like I said, I've gone with the US Amarillo, and what I will do is use 50 grams. All right, liquid malt extract. What I'm going to do for this brew is use the Mangrove Jack's light liquid malt extract. So what you need to get this brew fermenting is either 1 kg of dextrose, 1 kg of enhancer, or 1.2 kgs of liquid malt extract. So 1.2 kgs of light liquid malt extract. I'm also going to use an additional packet of 600 grams of light liquid malt extract. So what I'm essentially doing is using 1.8 kgs. The expected ABV on the pack is 4.4%, so I would say for the brew that we do straight off the bat, will come through at about that. Because we're using additional liquid malt extract, I would expect to be getting a slightly higher ABV on the recipe brew. It's going to give us a little bit more body, a smoother mouthfeel, which will probably go pretty well with the hops we're adding and just help round out that profile. So that's my plan there. Alright guys, let's talk about process and then we're going to get this brew on. So remember that what we're doing is making 2 separate brews. One of these brews we want to make as simple as possible. So I'm going to use the kit by itself. I'm going to use the factory yeast, which is on the bottom of the kit. We're going to use a bag of dextrose, get some water in and get this brew fermenting. For the second brew, what we're going to do is we're going to make that recipe. So we're going to use the kit. We're going to use a premium yeast. Remember, if you are swapping the yeast out, don't use that as well. So you're only using the premium yeast. I'm going to use a hop combination and we're going to use liquid malt extract. My recipe brew is going to go into my fermenting fridge, and the basic brew is going to ferment in ambient temperature. Now, the recommended or the optimal fermentation temperature range for this kit is 20 to 25 degrees. I'm currently in autumn, so I reckon that we're going to ferment perfectly for that kit as we stand. If you remember the yeast, the ideal fermentation temperature range, I think the suitable was 12 to 25, but the ideal was 15 to 20. So what I'm going to do is look to ferment that at around about that 17, 18 mark. That's going into my temperature controlled fridge, so we'll be able to hold it there, nice and stable. So all that said, I'm going to cover off a few more of the details when we actually get into the process. But right now, too much talking, not enough brewing. Let's get this brew on, and I'll see you guys on the other side for the taste test. Cheers. Done. Right guys, welcome to the garage. These guys are set. So here is brew number 1, our basics brew. What I do once I get it down here is just let it sit. I'll check it tonight, but I may even let it sit through to tomorrow afternoon depending on where the temperature is. What I will aim to do is look for the temperature to be down to at least that kind of 24 to 28 mark to pitch, with the expectation that temperature will come down a little bit further. Right, let's check out the other brew. Over here, just to our left, literally put this in the fridge a couple of minutes ago, so we can see the temperature climbing up. So I've got the probe, I'll show you in a second. It should be close to 40, I'm guessing, if not a bit over, based on the fact we use boiling temperature. I've set this to come down to 15, and if we have a look in there, we can see the fridge is on, probe is hooked up to the side. This guy here, I will check him tonight, and I think the temperature will have come down quite a lot. Obviously he's in the fridge. I want to be pitching this yeast certainly under 25, but I'll be happy with anywhere between 20 and 25, with the expectation that we will be fermenting through between 15 and 18. That's all for now. I'll see you guys when I pitch the yeast. We are approximately 10 hours past when I brought the brews down. If I look at the firm strip on the side, it's not very clear in the light, but basically it looks like we're sort of between around about 24, 26, which is where I said I wanted to pitch the yeast. This is of course our recipe brew. So I have here our packet of S33. Yeah, not really much to say. Going to get that lid off and then we will get this pitched. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Get that yeast in. Right, good to go. Alright, going to get this lid back on. One thing I didn't mention earlier was when I was going to put the hops in. So what my plan is to let this run 7 days, and then I will come back and put that 50 grams of hops in. Yeah, so next time you see me will be 7 days. Cheers. Oh, we'll go check out the basic brew over the other side. Alright guys, here's our basics brew. As I mentioned, we're doing this one in ambient. As we would expect, so this one's been down here the same amount of time, but it is running a bit warmer. Kind of looks like it's somewhere between around about the 26 mark. Potentially a smidge warmer than what we would want to be pitching at, but the alternative, which is fine, would be leaving it overnight and coming back in the morning. I know that I'm not going to have time tomorrow morning, so I'm going to pitch it now and let it drop the last couple of degrees overnight. So same as the other one, let's get this lid off and get into it. Alright guys, when you buy the pack, that yeast is glued on the bottom, so if you go looking for it, that's where you'll find it. Here we go, pitching. Boom, job done. Alright, so I'm going to close this lid and that's it. We won't be touching this bad boy again. He has everything in that he's going to get. So what I always say is fermentation will be done when you get 2 days of constant final gravity. I would guess that this brew will be done in, I would expect it to be done in somewhere between 7 and 9 days. Could be quicker, might take a bit longer. I never put a time limit, you just sort of get used to what you might expect. But like I said, it's not the number of days you're counting, you wait until you get your stable final gravity. Potentially the other brew might take a day or two longer, given we're fermenting at a slightly lower temperature, but yeah, we'll see. Alright guys, I will close this up and I'll see you when we pitch the hops on our recipe brew. Cheers! Hi guys and gals, welcome back to the garage. We are day 7 and this right here is our basics brew. It has been fermenting, according to the therm strip, between 22 and 24 degrees, which is smack into that ideal range for the factory yeast. One little thing though, check that out. No bubbling and water is level. One of the most common questions I see in forums is whether fermentation is still going, and key message is just because you've got no activity in the bubbler doesn't mean you're still fermenting. Let's have a quick little look inside. There we go guys. Alright, very quickly, I don't advocate taking the lid off. It's just saying, you know, every time you take that off is a chance for bacteria. But when you see that, you can quite clearly see, yeah, still fermenting, right? So just because you don't have visible activity in your bubbler doesn't mean you're not still fermenting. And I'd guess that's probably one of the biggest things that leads to overcarbonation is bottling too early. So we're on day 7, and never be afraid to let your brew just keep sitting there, even if it has stopped fermenting. Sitting there for an extra day or two is going to do it no harm. If anything, it's only going to do it good. I have taken a gravity reading as well. Currently 1.008. Target final gravity was 1.005. If we hit that, we will hit the target ABV on the pack. But yeah, we will leave it, we'll let it carry on fermenting, and with this one, I'm not going to do anything to it. No findings, no nothing. I will still rack this off into the bottling bucket though. So no findings, obviously no cold crashing. I'll rack this off into the bottling bucket. And then we'll bottle, use carbonation drops. So I am actually just going to let this one sit and take it out to closer to 2 weeks. Yeah, so final update on this one to come when we do the taste test. Let's go across and check out our recipe brew. Alright guys, here is our recipe brew. As we can see in there, still a bit of pressure in the bubbler. So this one's got a visible sign that we're obviously still fermenting, which is what we expect. Took a gravity reading from this guy as well. He was on 1.022. Gravity is going to be higher here because we're using liquid malt extract. Right, what I got there in a sanitized cup is 50 grams of our Amarillo hops. Let's get the lid off and get these guys in. Here we are guys, a lot more fermentation activity in there, and that's a really interesting layer on the top. I've never seen that before, not quite like that. But we'll go with it for now. I think I forgot to mention before, obviously we're in the fridge here. Temperature controller is set to 16 degrees, so it's obviously been, at least the ambient temperature in the fridge has been holding to that. But here's our hops. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that I go commando. Alright, so that argument for commando is that you increase the contact of surface area between your hop and the brew, and therefore the transfer of the characteristics that you're looking for. The argument against is that you're not containing your effectively organic matter you're putting in the brew, and therefore you might get the odd particle hanging around. But as you know, I cold crash yeast findings and deal to 99% of that. In that sediment filter in the bottling bucket, which goes a long way. So from here, okay, so I mentioned before we're on day 7, that's the same for both of them. For this brew, I'm going to leave it alone. I'll check it again on day 10. This one might take a fraction longer, so I'll check it on day 10 and see where we're at. If at whatever point we've had 2 days in a row of constant gravity readings, I will add findings. I'll then leave it alone for another 24 hours, and then I'll cold crash for 24 hours before I bottle. Same with the other brew. I'll rack this off into a bottling bucket. I'll use carb drops, and we're good to go. So, time to get this lid back on. All that said, guys, this time I will officially see you guys on the other side for the taste test. Cheers, see you. Hi guys, welcome back to the official taste test of the Mangrove Jack's Lucky Goat Pale Ale. As you know by now, we've done 2 brews, a basics brew where we looked for the easiest, the simplest, the most cost-effective way to put a brew together, and a recipe brew where we took some premium ingredients to see if we could get a better result and something we liked a bit better. Let's crack these open and see what we get. Just before I go there, I'm really sorry. There's relentless rain outside, and I know when it's raining it puts it just lowers the sound quality of these videos, so I apologise, but I haven't been able to get a break in the rain for a few days. I'm in the middle of winter, so we're going to deal with it. Basics brew, bottle, glass, pouring. Yeah, pouring with rain and pouring beer. Here we go, guys. Check that out. It's pretty good, eh? Right, so first thing, as the colour on the packet suggested, we have a really, really bright gold. It's really awesome. I'm also incredibly impressed with how that has bottle cleared. It's just come up, hopefully you can see that, it's just come up exceptionally well. What I would say in general is that so where I am now with this review, this is 10 weeks old, which is the basics brew. This one is 8 weeks old. Now I did put them both on at the same time, but I actually left this one here in the fermenter for an extra couple of weeks, and I'll talk about that a little later. So this one here, 10 weeks old. What I would say is that the flavour profile has really, really settled down at this point. It's a very light malt character and in general, a very delicate aroma and flavour profile in terms of those fruity notes and that hint of vanilla which the packet told us to expect. The other thing that I would say is, as we know with dextrose, we got that really, really sweet tone. When I was drinking this earlier, potentially between the 6 to sort of 8 week mark, I would have tried it first at 4 weeks. The sweetness was a lot more dominant. and it's really fallen away as the brew has settled down. Interestingly, so whilst I don't prefer that sweet tone, if I think back to my last brew review, it's somewhat worked better. If I think about the flavour profile here, the light malt character and the but more the fruity notes and that sort of hint of vanilla, it's that sweetness has accompanied that a lot better. If I think back to the last brew review I did, which was the Czech Pilsner, which was sort of spicy, herbal, earthy notes, that sweetness worked a lot less with it. So although dextrose will give you a sweeter tone, I guess one of the things I've probably accepted with this brew in particular is that it's not necessarily a bad thing, A, if it's what you prefer, and B, if it works with the style of beer. But I would say this is highly, highly drinkable. And I'm happy to give it a 6.5 on the Homebrew Republic brew scale. You can check that out on the website. The only thing I would say, I mean, it's a pale ale, but in some respects, visually and from a flavour and a characteristics profile, it's somewhat indistinguishable from a lager. And especially with the dextrose, it has that very, very light body, so it's definitely, it's a crisp, light body, easy drinking brew in that current state. Alright, recipe brew. Bottle, glass, pouring. Here we go, guys. That is our recipe brew. I could have poured that a bit better to keep the head down a bit, but there you go, check it out. This never comes out, like the video just doesn't properly pick up the colour difference. So I don't know how well we'll see the difference there on the lens, but essentially this one here, still gold, but a lot more richness and far greater depth of colour. Comes off looking a bit darker, but very, very beautiful. It's very nice. As we'd expect using liquid malt extract, we do get more head and better head retention. Okay. Oh man. I haven't had this for a couple of weeks. Excuse me, and it's got even better. It's really cool. Okay. That's awesome. Alright, so again, same as the other brew, it does have that depth of colour, but a very, very clean and clear finish. This one we did use the findings and we did cold crash. But interestingly, I don't know if I could argue a difference in them. This one here has come up really well. Okay. For the liquid malt extract, we used the light liquid malt extract, and we've used the Amarillo hop. Remember Amarillo, citrusy note, closer to orange. But straight away, this one here has a bolder and a more prominent profile for its aroma. This one, very light, very delicate, very easygoing. This one here, more going for it. The aroma is very much led out by that citrus tone on the Amarillo hop. It's great, it's a really nice hop. Alright, drinking this straight away, there's more body. That's really, really noticeable in a good way. We've got a stronger malt character coming through, and it's perfectly balanced with that Amarillo hop. So the malt character, we're getting a stronger flavour profile and a little bit of malt sweetness, and what that Amarillo is doing, that citrus tone, is it's cutting through that sweetness and balancing that malt character really, really perfectly. So it's been a really enjoyable brew. What I would say, two things. Number one, so we used 50 grams of Amarillo. I think that's, in this context, it's perfect. Like, it's really perfectly balanced out. It's a really well balanced brew, and I like it. If you prefer a bigger hoppy character, this would easily carry more hops. You could easily drop in 100 grams of Amarillo. The second thing I would say though is that I feel like between building up the malt character and the hops, because the flavour profile of the original kit is so delicate, it's suppressed, for lack of a better, or masked those elements, and those have become the dominant flavour characteristics of the brew. So if you wanted to, you could easily use multiple hops, maybe something like a Motiri to introduce some tropical flavours, especially if you wanted to build up that hop character and use more like 100 grams of hops. The other thing I would say to that, I know I just talked then about masking or suppressing the original kit, but what I think is great about this kit is that it can really easily go in different directions. So I mentioned before I've done this brew previously, and I took quite a different approach. I used some ultralight liquid malt extract, and I used the Nelson Sauvin hop, and got a really, really different brew, but an equally great brew in its own way. So I think one of the good things about this kit is that it is really flexible, and it's a great kit to use as a base and then pull in the direction that you want to go as a brewer. The other thing I would say is that whilst I like this brew here, it's really nice, it's really drinkable, I feel like I look at that and I visually don't go, I've picked up a pale ale. Happy to say I've picked up an ale. I think it sort of fits that bill or that description quite well, but not a pale ale. But going back to that flexible piece, if that's what you enjoy, it's an incredibly great brew. If I wanted to try and pull it more towards that pale ale direction, this kit, and I mentioned earlier, it's generally regarded as one of the more popular Mangrove Jack's kits. I think it's the second most popular kit on our site, and generally in forums it's always favoured and always talked about reasonably positively for good reason. I'll happily brew this again, but I'm also kind of not done experimenting with it. So next time I do prefer this with the liquid malt extract, but I would experiment with either a blonde or perhaps a wheat, probably the wheat liquid malt extract, and see if I can pull that more visually in the direction of what we would expect from a pale ale. So that's kind of my thinking there. I did rate this one more highly than this. I went for an 8.5 on the Homebrew Republic brew scale. I think this is an exceptional brew. The other thing I would say, and I've talked about this before, is especially with this one, feel free to experiment with the temperature that you drink it at. There is quite a bit of content online around what's regarded as the optimal temperature to drink certain styles of beer. And ales, the guideline or the general line of thinking is you don't drink them crisp cold straight out of the fridge. You want to bring them up a little bit. Sorry. And there is actually a specific temperature range that there's guidance, but what I've noticed is or for me, when I left this out, so if I pull this out of the fridge and I'll drink this one, but I'll leave this one sitting on the bench, leave the bottle sitting on the bench, so it has sort of half an hour, 45 minutes to just lose the chill and start to come up a little bit, I find the flavour profile changes quite considerably, and in particular I get more kind of fruity notes coming through, which is awesome. It's just a different drinking experience. The other thing I notice changes is even if I poured this now and put this in the fridge and then left it alone for half an hour to an hour and came back, just that having rested seems to change, I feel, changes the flavour profile. So plenty of ways there to experiment with how you're drinking it. The next thing I would say, and probably the more important, is what did my friends say? And this was widely consumed by my friends. And this one here, crowd favourite, crowd pleaser. Sometimes we went this one first and then this one. Sometimes we went basics and then into this one. So the first thing I would say is the basics didn't receive a bad review. So no one went, that's bad, I don't like it. It was always, especially if that one was first, it was always, yep, that's all right, that's pretty good. But this one here, it was always complemented really well, and the things that people would sort of say was the flavour profile was a lot cleaner, which I agree with. I think that sweetness really, from the dextrose, I don't think it does the flavour profile in terms of cleanness any favours, whereas your liquid malt extract just gives you a far cleaner flavour profile and really focuses on the ingredients that you've used. The next thing people talked about was the body. I think that's a personal preference thing, but I do think most people lean towards having a little bit of body in a beer and a little bit of mouthfeel. And the next thing people talked about was that this one is definitely more flavoursome. And the key thing for me is that I always kind of look for is, do people come back for another pint? Like, people will often have the first pint to be polite and have it, but do people go, man, that was good, can I grab another one? Or accept another one if you offer, and this one always went for the second pint, so it was really, really well received. And like I said, whilst I think this has probably pulled away a bit from being a pale ale, it's definitely in ale territory, if not more towards being like APA or IPA kind of style, but great brew, and I really enjoyed it, so did my friends. Last thing to talk about real quick, ABV. This one came out at 4.2. I can't quite remember off the top of my head what the target ABV was, but I thought this was spot on it. From memory, I'm thinking 4.2. This one, I just scraped in at 4. But what I'm going to start doing, and I mentioned before I let this one actually sit in the fermenter for close to 4 weeks, I was worried that fermentation hadn't finished. It seemed to stall, but kind of still be there. So there's a couple of things in that. Number one, don't ever be afraid, and I've kind of said this earlier, but don't ever be afraid to just let your brew sit. If you're not sure that fermentation's finished, it's going to do it no harm to sit there for more than the recommended period of time. And like I said, this one was sitting in there for nearly 4 weeks. It's done it no harm. Excuse me. I did meet a guy once who left a brew in his fermenter, largely for no obvious reason I could see, to experiment. He left it in his fermenter for 6 months and it still worked. So I'm not recommending that or suggesting that's what you do, but my point would be, you know, if you're worried that fermentation hasn't finished, feel free to leave it in the fermenter for a little bit of extra time. The other thing that I would say is my final gravity didn't get down where I thought it would go, which obviously links back into that ABV. What I haven't generally done as a practice, but what I think I'm going to start doing is whenever I'm worried or if fermentation seems to have stalled, the general guidance that comes from online is give your fermenter a shake, and just any you know, the yeast may have fallen out of suspension and started to settle on the bottom. Aggravate that sediment on the bottom, get the yeast back into the brew, and it may well get that fermentation going again and just drop off a couple of extra points on your gravity, which would have brought that up to where we wanted it to be. So yeah, all that said, really happy. And like I said, not done experimenting. This is a great kit. I'll happily brew it again, and I'll probably try a couple of different approaches, particularly with the different liquid malt extracts. Probably head towards a wheat next time. What have I got coming up? The next brew that I've done, which I've actually had the first tastes of now, is the Black Rock Dry Lager. Incredibly happy with that brew. It's probably, as long as the flavour profile holds as it matures, I would say it's one of the best lagers I've ever done, and the taste tests that my friends have been doing, the feedback is the same, so I'm really happy with that. The next one, which I'm really excited about, and I'm actually going to put it down today after we finish this video, is one of the new Black Rock Brew in a Bag kits. They are new to the New Zealand market. But two things, I'm going to put a link up in the screen here. I had a chat with Brendan from Black Rock. The purpose of the chat was to talk about the Brew in the Bag kits, because or the bag and box, whatever you want to call them, they're still a kit approach, but they're very different from the extract kits that we use. And so the purpose of that conversation was, what is the bag and box kit, how is it different, and what are the benefits of it? But what we ended up talking about was the Black Rock brand. We did talk about the bag and box kit, but we talked about the Black Rock brand, we talked about brewing in general, and we talked about extract brewing kits. It was a really cool conversation, and I think there's something in there for everyone. Make sure you go check it out. If you are in New Zealand and you are watching this video in June or July 2023, there is also a promotion on our site for Black Rock kits, so make sure you get onto the site and go check that out. All that said, guys, I'm going to say thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. If it added value, feel free to subscribe. Make sure you turn on those notifications. I'm going to say cheers. Catch you next time.
Cheers!